I could hear the soft hum of the trading floor's LED screens as I sat alone in the VC office at 237 IG. My name is Jordan Mercer, and tonight a single anomaly in our financial reports threatened to unravel everything I'd worked for. The quarterly overview flashed a negative $2,500,000, 0 cents cash flow that vanished in less than 2 hours. My pulse raced as I traced transaction IDs across the dashboard, a string of unrecognized transfers totaling $2.50 moved to an offshore account at 12:05 p.m. The alarm in my brain went off, but the rest of the world seemed asleep. I tapped my keyboard, the familiar click echoing in the silence. Even the city lights outside felt distant. I remembered how Taylor, now Morgan Blake, had trusted me with the initial seed investment. Back then, we celebrated landing a $10 million, 0 cent Series A round beneath Manhattan's skyscrapers. Tonight, that triumph tasted sour. I leaned back, adrenaline from closing deals. The sight of red numbers on midnight screen carried a deep chill. Something was terribly wrong. I still remember that summer night in my second year at BrightWave Ventures, sitting atop the 42nd floor rooftop terrace in Midtown Manhattan with Morgan Blake. The city lights glittered beneath us, and a gentle breeze drifting on the Hudson River carried the faint hum of traffic below. I, Jordan Mercer, felt as though I held the pulse of the entire startup ecosystem in my hands. It was June 14, 2018, the date that forever imprinted itself on my memory as Morgan slid a pristine term sheet across the metal table toward me after 6 months of refining pitch decks and financial models. Fresh out of NYU's Stern School of Business, I wore equal parts exhilaration and imposter syndrome. BrightWave had offered me a starting salary of $85,000. 0 cents per year, with a $15,000 0 cent signing bonus. I can still taste the crisp ink scent of that contract enough to quiet the whisper of doubt in my mind. Morgan, with 8 years of venture capital experience, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Jordan," she said, voice steady. "VC isn't just numbers on paper, it's the story we bring to life." Over the coming weeks, I plunged into term sheets like a diver into the ocean. I memorized the intricacies of internal rate of return calculations and wrestled with cap tables in Excel until my eyes blurred. Morgan guided me patiently through the waterfall distribution process. Imagine a startup exits at 10 times its seed valuation. Our limited partners still see threefold returns after preferred shares are paid out. She sketched diagrams on a sunlit whiteboard, LED lights from the adjacent bar casting soft reflections on half-empty glasses of Cabernet. I watched, enthralled as abstract equations transformed into vivid narratives of risk and reward. We became inseparable partners in this endeavor. Our first summer rooftop party remains etched in my mind. 50 startup founders, legal advisors, and tech journalists mingled beneath strings of Edison bulbs. Morgan, ever proud, introduced me to the crowd. "This is Jordan Mercer, our risk analyst, who spotted a $200,000 0 cents operating cost miscalculation that could have derailed our budget." A TechCrunch reporter turned, microphone in hand, to ask how we evaluated fintech opportunities. My heart thumped, but I spoke with a newfound confidence born from nights spent crunching data until dawn. Over the next 2 years, Morgan and I conducted due diligence on upwards of 20 startups. I can still recite the numbers: the initial $500,000 0 cents allocated to a Brooklyn biotech firm, projecting a 300% revenue surge based on a pending patent. After dissecting the patent filing, we discovered a missing detailed protocol, prompting us to withdraw before that $500,000 became a $1,200,000 0 cents write-down. "Jordan," Morgan commended, Your attention to detail saved us that loss. Yet the sweet taste of triumph was equally memorable. A $750,000, 0 cents, Series A investment in a peer-to-peer payment platform ultimately yielded $3,200,000, 0 cents, when a major bank acquired it 18 months later. I recall the acquisition ceremony. Morgan raised a flute of champagne, the cork popping like a celebratory burst, while I listened to the applause echo off glass towers. Like the heartbeat of our fund, beyond spreadsheets and projections, Morgan and I shared personal milestones that bonded us further. For my 28th birthday, we chartered a small yacht on the Hudson after our fund achieved an 18% IR for the fiscal year. Morgan handed me a handwritten card. You illuminated every risk we faced. Here's to many more safe bets. The next Christmas, she gifted me a leather-bound journal engraved with my name, a repository for every lesson and metric I would accumulate. By early 2021, after crafting hundreds of financial models, managing dozens of cap tables, and coordinating email threads with dozens of CEOs, I earned a promotion to senior risk analyst. My base salary rose to $105,000, 0 cents, and came with a $20,000, 0 cents year-end bonus, a testament to the long hours I'd poured into forecasting burn rates and market traction. But more than the numbers, I treasured Morgan's unwavering trust. Each chart I presented at board meetings carried the combined imprint of our late-night strategy sessions and impromptu rooftop debriefs. That bond became my anchor in a world of uncertainty. When the office fell silent and the screens dimmed each night, I often replayed Morgan's words, "In Vichy, trust is your currency." It was that invisible tether that carried me forward, unaware that subtle fissures were forming beneath the surface of our partnership. I think back to the marathon data analysis session of September 2021, when we poured over 3 years of cash burn metrics for a health tech startup. Prices for key materials had spiked 15%, and our projections fell short by $400,000, 0 cents. We worked through 2 pots of coffee and a dozen post-it notes before pinpointing the supply chain inefficiency. Morgan smiled tiredly and said, "We'll adjust the model for inflation projections. Crisis reveals opportunity." It was our mantra: treat data as a living narrative, not dry facts. Through these shared victories and late-night epiphanies, Morgan and I didn't just build a professional rapport. We forged a friendship anchored by mutual respect. During a rainy evening in October 2021, after a grueling board review that stretched past midnight, Morgan suggested we decompress at a nearby jazz bar. Under soft blue lights and the smooth saxophone of a trio, we recounted childhood. Morgan once wanted to be a journalist. I dreamt of writing novels. Over a second round of bourbon, she confessed her fear. "What if we lead you astray? You've trusted me more than anyone." I reassured her. Our successes are testament to our synergy. By winter's end, our fund had allocated over $25 million, 0 cents, across 15 startups, with an average projected IRR of 22%. We celebrated at a holiday gala atop a snowy Central Park building, where Morgan toasted our partnership. To Jordan Mercer, the analytical heartbeat of BrightWave, I raised my glass, brimming with gratitude for the mentor who saw my potential. These memories form the warm core of my past, a tapestry woven with clinking glasses, flickering skyline reflections, and the steady glow of laptop screens. They were the foundation on which I built my career, and the source of a bond I believed unbreakable. Little did I know that beneath that shimmering veneer of camaraderie, the first signs of trouble had already begun to stir, setting in motion a betrayal that would test every lush Morgan and I had learned together. I first sensed trouble on a Tuesday night in October 2021, while the rest of the trading floor lay silent beneath glow of monitors. It was 3:17 a.m. when a green Slack notification blinked on my screen. Morgan Blake had messaged me, unusually frantic. The message read, "Jordan, can you double-check the cash burn numbers for Redwood Health? Something's off." Attached was a spreadsheet showing a $400,000 0 cents discrepancy in the month-end report. My heart skipped. I knew Morgan never panicked over simple typos. I opened the ledger and scanned line by line. All the usual projections were there: payroll, office rent, legal fees, until I hit a series of microtransactions labeled miscellaneous. 27 entries on October 1st totaled exactly $150,000, 0 cents routed to an unrecognized account. I cross-referenced our bank's fraudulent log. Nothing flagged. My pulse thundered as I realized this was no rounding error. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. A new email arrived from an anonymous address. Subject: red flags. The body contained a single sentence: "Morgan isn't who you think she is. Check the BTC transfers." Below that, a link to a .csv file. My finger hesitated, then I downloaded it. Inside were 17 Bitcoin transactions, 0.75 BTC. Takings stem between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. on September 30th. At today's rate, that totaled roughly $105,000, 0 cents substantial for side payments. I called our head of operations, Lena, at 3:45 a.m. She answered groggily. "Jordan, what's up?" I explained the ledger gap and BTC transfers. Lena mulled for a moment. There was a memo about consulting fees for Redwood's founder, Rowan Steele. I never saw the details. I asked her to forward every memo related to that fee. As I waited, dread coiled in my stomach. By 4:02 a.m., Lena's reply pinged in 3 encrypted PDF memos. Morgan's electronic signature appeared on each, authorizing $1,200,000, 0 cents, in advisory fees to Rowan's offshore entity. An account name that matched none of our KYC records. The timestamp: September 30th, all around midnight. Morgan was officially signing off on huge sums while reporting normal burn rates to me and the board. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my breathing. This wasn't just a reporting error, it was active deception. I drafted an email to Morgan at 4:10 a.m. "Morgan, I've found unrecorded $150, 0 cents K microtransactions and significant BT transfers tied to Redwood Health. Also 3 advisory invoices totaling $1.20 m. Please explain before I escalate." My finger hovered over send. I rewrote it 3 times. Didn't want to come across accusatory without more proof. Finally, I pressed send. Immediately, Slack lit up. Morgan, calling me on the VC office line. I answered on speaker. Her voice, normally calm, quivered. "Jordan, we need to talk." A deafening silence filled the office. Outside, the financial district's neon lights flickered past my window. I asked Morgan, "What's going on with Redwood's funds?" There was another pause. Softly, she said, "I authorized those payouts. Rowan promised me a seat on the board in return." My stomach dropped. "You what? You didn't tell me or the partners." Morgan stammered. "I thought it would be temporary. We'd recoup it once they closed their Series B. It was my call." I closed my eyes, feeling the ground shift beneath. Trust, the bedrock of our partnership, crumbled in that moment. My mind raced through every late-night call, every rooftop toast, every congratulatory handshake. Had it all been built on deceit? I demanded, "Send me all correspondence with Rowan immediately. I'll need full access to bank statements, escrow accounts, everything. Morgan's voice turned defensive. Jordan, stop. If you dig, people will think I'm embezzling. You'll destroy my career too. She hung up. The rest of that night I sat alone, combing through email logs and bank exports. By dawn, I had assembled a dossier, 15 encrypted emails between Morgan and Rowan. Screenshots of Slack conversations, where Morgan assured Rowan she'd cover any losses personally, and a bank routing slip for Rowan's offshore account in the Cayman Islands. At 7:12 a.m., as the first traders arrived, I delivered the dossier to Lena and our legal counsel, Aaron Chen. Lena's eyes widened and her jaw tightened. "This is solid," he said quietly, "but we need to move fast. Regulatory reporting, board notification." My hands trembled as I scheduled a board meeting for that afternoon. Morgan would have to answer to our limited partners. Before leaving the office at 8 a.m., legs heavy as lead, I paused at the empty rooftop where Morgan and I once toasted champagne. The city below buzzed with hopes and dreams. Above, I felt only cold betrayal. I snapped a photo of the skyline, drafting a private note. Used to feel invincible, now feel deceived. Walking out of BrightWave's glass doors, I realized the first signs of trouble had already become a chasm. The bond Morgan and I shared was fractured beyond repair. And as the autumn chill bit my cheeks, I knew that what happened next would define every lesson I'd ever learned about trust, risk, and the human heart. I had always prided myself on seeing around corners, anticipating market shifts, spotting hidden liabilities, but nothing prepared me for the betrayal that unfolded on that rainy November morning. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., yet at 8:45, I found myself staring at Morgan's empty seat in the glass-walled conference room, heart pounding in my chest. As the limited partners filed in 8 serious faces from Calridge Capital and 2 from Evergreen Ventures, I took a deep breath and began. I laid out the timeline, the unrecorded $150,000, 0 cents microtransactions, the 0.75 BTC side payments, and the 3 advisory fee invoices totaling $1,200,000, 0 cents to Rowan Steele's offshore account. I flashed the bank routing slip for the Cayman Islands, and the partners' eyes narrowed in unison. Then came the shock. Morgan's email, timestamped at 9:58 a.m., arrived in my inbox. Subject line, "Please read before you proceed." Every head turned as I tapped it open. "Jordan, I'm deeply sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Roland promised he would return every dollar with interest once the Series B closed. I believed him. I thought I could fix this before anyone noticed. Please forgive me." Morgan, a wave of cold swept over me. I looked up, searching for Morgan's face in the mirrored walls, finding only my own reflection staring back, haunted and disbelieving. Calridge's senior partner Mitchell Hayes leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Jordan, is this true?" His voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of accusation. I nodded, swallowing. Morgan's plea laid bare every fracture in our partnership. "We have corroborated emails, signed memos, and bank transfers," I said evenly. "I regret to inform you that Morgan, our chief risk officer, authorized these payments without approval and failed to disclose them. I discovered the discrepancies in the early hours today." The room fell silent. Samantha Liu from Evergreen Ventures released an audible gasp. "But Morgan's reputation is impeccable. How could she risk so much?" she whispered. A rush of memories flooded me. Morgan's confident smile as she handed me my first bonus. Our midnight data sessions illuminated by twin laptop screens. The shared laughter over steel pizza slices. Had I been so blind? I flipped to the next slide, revealing Morgan's correspondence with Rowan Steele. In one email dated September 28, she wrote, "I'll process the advisory fee tonight. Keep the close on Series B quiet until next week." Rowan's reply, "Your discretion is appreciated. I'll ensure the board seat and 5% equity allocation as promised." The room's atmosphere shifted from shock to steely resolve. Mitchell pressed on. "What does this mean for our exposure? How much are we at risk of losing?" I clicked to the financial model I'd prepared overnight. If Rowan's firm fails to honor the repayment clause, we stand to lose the full $1,200,000, 0 cents, plus accrued interest, currently projected at an additional $48,000, 0 cents. Combined with the $150,000, 0 cents microtransactions and Bitcoin fees, our total direct loss is $1,398,000, 0 cents. Moreover, reputational damage could jeopardize our ability to raise our next fund, estimated at $25 million, 0 cents. A murmur rippled through the partners. Samantha tapped her pen thoughtfully. "These numbers are unacceptable. What's your recommendation, Jordan?" I squared my shoulders. "I propose we immediately freeze Rowan Steele's remaining funding and issue a formal default notice. Simultaneously, we place Morgan on administrative leave, pending full forensic review. We should also empower Aaron Chun, our legal counsel, to file a preliminary incident report with the SEC and Cayman authorities to preserve our standing and initiate recovery efforts." Mitchell nodded. "Proceed." He turned to me. "Jordan, take point. Prepare all necessary documentation by close of business. We'll convene an emergency session if needed." As the meeting dissolved, I gathered my laptop and stepped into the hallway. My phone vibrated. Morgan calling again. I ignored it, letting voicemail capture her pleas. The betrayal felt seismic, but I had a fiduciary duty to act swiftly. Back at my desk, I drafted the freeze order for Rowan's account and the administrative leave memo for Morgan. Every word cut like a scalpel. I instructed Aaron to coordinate with our audit firm and engage an independent forensic investigator at an estimated cost of $20,000, 0 cents per day, to trace all tainted funds and transactions. At 2:15 p.m., I walked to Morgan's office on the 28th floor, my steps echoing in the corridor. The door was closed. I knocked once. She opened it, eyes red-rimmed, clutching her leather journal. "Jordan," she whispered, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." I stepped in and closed the door behind me. "Morgan, you have 24 hours to relinquish all company devices, surrender your keycard, and hand over any personal documents related to BrightWave's finances," I said firmly. "After that, we'll initiate legal proceedings." "I didn't want to do this, but you left me no choice." She trembled. "Please let me explain. Roland lied to me. He never intended to repay. I only realized at 5 a.m. when I tried to reallocate funds for another project. I panicked." I glanced at her journal, the pages stained with tears. "You panicked, then covered it up, violating every principle we stood for." My voice softened. "I believed in you. We were partners." She bowed her head. "I know, I let you down. I'm ready to face the consequences." I handed her the administrative leave memo. "Read this, sign it. I'll have HR meet you downstairs." Morgan's shoulders shook as she took the paper. "Thank you for your professionalism, at least." I couldn't meet her eyes. "Goodbye, Morgan." As I watched her walk away, escorted by 2 security officers, the weight of the morning pressed down on me. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. I felt a hollow ache where trust had been. Late that evening, after sending the final directives to the audit firm and legal team, I sat alone in my apartment. The rain pattered against the windows. I pulled out the leather journal Morgan had given me and opened to the first page. Jordan Mercer. Every risk illuminated. I closed it, uncertain whether to keep it as a reminder or burn it. In that moment, I realized that the major betrayal, the crux of the story, wasn't just Morgan's deception, but the shattering of my own illusions. I had believed in fairness, shared vision, and unbreakable bonds. Instead, I found that risk wasn't just a financial metric. It lived in every human heart, capable of veering unexpectedly into greed and fear. But I had a duty to move forward. The fund's reputation, our limited partner's money, and my own integrity depended on it. We poured a glass of whiskey, raised it to the empty room, and whispered, "To moving on." Then I opened my laptop and began drafting the press release. BrightWave Ventures initiates recovery actions, following internal audit findings. The betrayal was public now, and so was my resolve. I didn't sleep that night. The city's glow outside my apartment window blurred into streaks of neon as my mind replayed every moment of that board meeting. I, Jordan Mercer, had marched into the lion's den with hard evidence of Morgan's betrayal and emerged victorious on paper, but utterly hollow inside. My hand trembled as I refreshed my inbox for any sign of Rowan Steele's response, but all I saw were unread messages from friends checking in. I couldn't bring myself to reply. Around 2-3 a.m., I realized I was starving. I slipped into my kitchen in sweatpants and poured myself cold coffee from the French press. Each sip tasted bitter, like ashes. I scrolled through the leather-bound journal Morgan had given me 2 years ago. I flipped to the first page. Jordan Mercer. Every risk illuminated. Her handwriting looked foreign now, unfamiliar. I closed the book sharply and slid it into a drawer. By 4:30 a.m., exhaustion and adrenaline collided. My heart pounded so wildly I thought it might burst through my chest. I stumbled into the bathroom and looked at my reflection. Wide eyes, dark circles, a mouth set in a hard line. I splashed cold water on my face, but the numbness remained. I called my older sister Emily at 4:45 a.m. Her voicemail picked up. I left a whisper, no further details. With dawn approaching, I tried to focus on work, but every glance at my laptop made the office feel like a crime scene. At 6:15 a.m., I ducked into a 24-hour pharmacy and bought a jittery mix of pain relievers and energy drinks. The pharmacist, bleary-eyed, asked if I was okay. I muttered just headache and paid with trembling fingers. Back in my apartment, I arranged a makeshift desk by the window. I opened a blank document and stared at the cursor blinking mockingly. My vision blurred. I rubbed my temples. I tried to draft the follow-up memo for the audit firm. Clear, concise, unemotional, but words felt heavy. I deleted and rewrote the first sentence a dozen times before giving up. By mid-morning, the caffeine crash hit. My limbs felt leaden. I sank onto the couch and stared at the ceiling, willing myself to breathe slowly. My mind spiraled. Had I overreacted? Would the limited partners rebuild trust in me after this? Would they see me as the hero or the executioner? The more I thought, the darker it got. At 11:00 a.m., I collapsed onto the rooftop terrace again, the same one Morgan and I had toasted on that first summer night. The breeze here was sharper, carrying a faint smell of exhaust and rain from the prior evening. I curled into a ball on a bench and cried the first real tears since adolescence. They spilled loudly in the empty space. I clutched my head, sobbing, thinking of Morgan's apology email. "I'm so sorry, please forgive me." Forgive me? Could I ever? My phone buzzed an incoming Slack message from Aaron Chen. "Report due EOD. Need your sign-off." I wiped my tears, fingers sticky. How could I sign anything when my world was unraveling? I replied with a cryptic product. Working on it. A memory surfaced. Morgan and I dancing at our holiday gala in December 2021, laughing as fake snow fell around us. I closed my eyes, trying to capture that. I gripped the wooden armrest so hard, my knuckles whitened. By noon, my throat was dry. I downed another energy drink and forced myself to stand. I stumbled back inside and drafted the overdue memo to Aaron. Attached, please find the revised audit directives. Let me know if anything needs clarification. I added 5 bullet points, each a stab at normalcy. I hit send, hoping it sounded competent. As the afternoon sun climbed, I fought an overwhelming urge to sleep. I lay on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling aimlessly through photos of happier days. Morgan's triumphant grin at our first deal closing, my shocked expression when tech journalists quoted me. Each image felt like a taunt. I put the phone down and closed my eyes, but sleep eluded me. By 3:30 p.m., I reached out to Lena. Can we go over the Redwood Health paperwork? I need a sanity check. She replied almost instantly. Meet me in your office in 15. I changed into jeans and a sweater, heart thumping, and headed to BrightWave. Walking through the lobby, I felt exposed, as if everyone could see the turmoil etched on my face. I ducked into the elevator and there was Morgan, stepping out on the 28th floor. Her eyes met mine, hollow, remorseful. She looked ready to crumble. I clenched my jaw and moved past without a word. In my office, Lena pulled up the files. We worked in silence, the click of our keyboard sounding deafening. Every time I tried to speak, I choked on fear. Finally, I muttered, I don't know how to keep going. Lena paused the screen and looked at me. Jordan, you did the right thing. You protected the fund. It's okay to feel broken, but we need you at your best. Her words were gentle but firm like a life raft. I nodded, swallowing back tears. Thank you, I whispered. I spent the next 2 hours annotating legal memos, coordinating with Aaron on compliance filings, and compiling a timeline of Morgan's transactions. Lena stayed by my side, offering water and quiet reassurance. Without her, I would have collapsed again. By 5:45 p.m., I finally felt the adrenaline drain. My vision blurred from fatigue, but I had achieved something, a coherent set of documents ready for the next board update. I emailed Aaron. Everything is in place. I'm heading home now. On the elevator ride down, I hesitated on the 28th floor. Memories of Morgan's office flashed through my mind, the stolen laughter, the stolen trust. I walked past her door, resisting the urge to knock. At home, I poured a glass of water, sat at my kitchen table and opened the leather-bound journal once more. I wrote a single line on a fresh page. Emotion is risk, but so is indifference. The words felt true. As night fell, I still didn't sleep, but I felt a grudging sense of resolve forming. I would rebuild my reputation, the fund's integrity, and my own shattered faith. The emotional collapse had broken me, but I was determined to rise from the wreckage. I closed the journal and whispered into the darkness, I will survive this. I woke on the morning of November 3, 2021, with a heavy ache behind my eyes, but a flicker of resolve in my chest. The betrayal still stung, but I refused to let it define my next move. After slipping into my running shoes, I stepped out into the chill November air. The sky still ink brick above the Hudson River Greenway. Each footfall echoed against the pavement as I settled into a steady rhythm, counting breaths as 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Mile by mile, the knot of anxiety in my gut loosened, replaced by the kind of clarity that only physical exertion can deliver. By the time I reached the 3-mile mark, in 32 minutes, sweat stinging my eyes, I felt the familiar buzz of endorphin and a surprising surge of optimism. Back at my apartment, I squeezed a lemon into a glass of ice water and stared at my laptop as the first rays of dawn pierced the blinds. An email notification from Samantha Cole glowed in my inbox. She had wired $500,000, 0 cents, to BrightWave's operating account, no strings attached. My heart thudded. Samantha had believed in my talent when I was just starting at $85,000, 0 cents a year. And now, in my darkest hour, she was reaffirming her confidence. That single act of faith lit a spark inside me. I wasn't alone, and I still commanded the trust of key allies. I spent the next hour drafting what I later called my recovery blueprint, not as a checklist to present, but as a mental map to study my thoughts. I wove together priorities and contingencies into flowing prose, describing how I would stabilize payroll and legal expenses with Samantha's fund, invite independent auditors to trace every tainted dollar, and rebuild the fund's credibility through transparent communications with our limited partners. Each paragraph I typed banished a fragment of self-doubt. By 9 a.m., the document spanned 3 pages of confident action plans, my own testimony that I refused to be paralyzed by fear. That afternoon, I summoned my core team to a video call. Marcus Reed, our forensic accountant, dialed in from Chicago, mug of coffee in hand. Lena, our operations lead, appeared from her home office, and Aaron Chen, our counsel, joined with his webcam already active. I greeted them with more composure than I felt, speaking in a clear, measured voice. I laid out the situation, the $1,200,000, 0 cents, misdirected fees, the microtransactions, and our immediate infusion of capital. As I spoke, I watched my notes scroll across the screen, transformed from chaotic worry into an ordered plan of attack. Marcus confirmed he could deploy a team within 24 hours. Lena volunteered to coordinate staff morale efforts, and Aaron pledged to finalize our regulatory filings by week's end. In their steady responses, I found reassurance, as part of a team as determined as I was to right these wrongs. That evening, Samantha and I met at a small Tribeca bistro, its warm wood panels and low lighting a stark contrast to my sterile home office. Over grilled salmon and a side of roasted Brussels sprouts, she leaned forward. "Jordan," she paused, eyes steady. "BrightWave still has a future, and you're the one who will guide us there." As she spoke, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten. Her unwavering belief reminded me that recovery wasn't just about money or processes. It was about people trusting one another again. After dinner, I wandered home beneath amber street lamps, replaying Samantha's words. Back in my apartment, I found Morgan's unread Slack message blinking on my lock screen. "Can we talk?" My thumb hovered over the notification, but I chose restraint and deleted it. The spark of support I'd felt was too precious to risk by opening old wounds. Instead, I poured myself a glass of iced tea, settled onto the couch, and reopened my recovery blueprint. This time, I refined the language, weaving in quotes from our team meeting, notes on emerging audit findings, and updated timelines. Each revision felt like tightening the ropes of a safety net beneath me and the fund. Late that night, exhaustion finally claimed me. Before drifting off, I journaled a single sentence. Support ignited clarity, clarity forged resilience. I knew the journey ahead would be long. The fallout from betrayal seldom heals quickly, but I slept knowing I had taken the first crucial steps. When morning came, I would lace up my shoes again, perhaps for 5 miles this time, and continue mapping out the fund's resurrection. The recovery spark had flared. Now it was up to me to fan it into an unwavering flame. In the days following the board's decision to freeze Rowan Steele's account and place Morgan Blake on administrative leave, I immersed myself in a single-minded mission to turn the tables on the forces that had betrayed BrightWave Ventures. The sky over Manhattan often felt heavy, as though it bore witness to the fallout of our fractured trust, but I refused to let the weight crush me. Each morning, I arrived at the office early, greeted only by the hum of dormant computers and the faint scent of cold brew coffee in the air. As the senior risk analyst, now thrust into the role of de facto crisis manager, I had no choice but to lead. My first target was the offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Marcus Reed, our forensic accountant, worked tirelessly to trace every dollar that Rowan's shell company had siphoned. With his team's reports in hand, I drafted a letter to the Cayman Financial Authority, detailing the suspicious transfers amounting to $1,200,000, 0 cents plus interest. When I clicked send, a surge of adrenaline unlike any morning run or late-night audit session jolted through me. It was proof that the fund's reach extended beyond our glass walls. We were demanding accountability on a global stage. When the confirmation email arrived hours later, I allowed myself a small smile. This wasn't just recovery, it was retribution. Back in New York, I convened a discreet meeting with Aaron Chen and our board's legal counsel in one of BrightWave's smaller conference rooms. The atmosphere was sharper than the usual corporate coolness. Every whiteboard marker click and pen scratch felt charged with purpose. We pored over witness statements, emails, and bank records, each piece of evidence reinforcing the same narrative: Morgan and Rowan had colluded to enrich themselves at our expense. Aaron drafted a civil complaint seeking restitution and punitive damages. He advised me to prepare for depositions. My testimony would be crucial. As I co-signed the drafts, a sense of resolve settled in my core. I wasn't just protecting assets, now I was reclaiming truth. Turning the tables also meant confronting our internal processes. I led an all-hands workshop on transaction approvals and risk protocols, weaving real-life examples from our ordeal into the training. I shared my own missteps, the subtle red flags I'd almost missed, and the moments of doubt that slowed me down. I watched my colleagues lean forward as I described the tiny $150,000, 0 cents, transactions buried among thousands of legitimate entries, and how a seemingly innocuous Slack alert had unraveled a sophisticated embezzlement. By laying bare my vulnerabilities, I forged empathy and collective vigilance. They didn't just see a leader, they saw a partner who had faced betrayal head-on, and they pledged renewed commitment to our safeguard. I still remember Rosa in operations, tears in her eyes, thanking me for transparency that made her feel valued, rather than scared. Despite the whirlwind of legal action and policy overhauls, I made time for direct confrontation. Morgan's counsel arranged for a private deposition at our downtown offices. I sat across from her in a narrow conference room, its glass walls overlooking the East River. She looked smaller than I remembered, no longer the confident mentor, but a vulnerable figure facing her own downfall. I presented my questions with calm precision, each one backed by documented evidence. As her voice wavered over explanations of temporary lapses in judgment and misplaced trust in Rowan, I felt a mix of sorrow and steel. This was our last encounter, and even in that exchange, I realized the power had shifted irrevocably. I wasn't the protégé anymore. I was the one dictating the narrative, steering the conversation. The turning point came when Rowan Steele's legal team responded with an offer to settle for a partial refund and non-disclosure agreement. He insisted that large-scale litigation would drag out cost and publicize the scandal further. I drafted a counterproposal that demanded full restitution, accrued interest of $48,000, 0 cents, a formal public apology, and a clause preventing Rowan from serving on any board for 5 years. It was a gamble few settlements afford, both money and truth, but with endorsements from our limited partners and unwavering confidence from our legal team, I pushed ahead. When Rowan's attorneys finally caved and agreed to the terms, I allowed myself a real moment of satisfaction. We had extracted not only funds but also a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, ensuring that history would remember this as a case study in corporate accountability. Public acknowledgement required its own strategy. I worked closely with our PR advisors to craft a press release that balanced transparency with professionalism. I personally approved every line, ensuring it conveyed both the facts and our forward-looking resilience. The statement ran in industry newsletters the next morning, under the headline, "BrightWave Ventures recovers $1.40 money in record time after internal audit." Over the following days, major outlets including TechCrunch and VentureBeat praised the fund's swift response and integrity. I watched articles scroll across my screen, finance influencers tweeting their respect, and felt that familiar pride, tempered by the memory of betrayal, but real all the same. As the press cycle wound down, I turned my attention to the people who had stayed. I organized a small celebration near the office, flaky croissants, artisanal coffee, and handwritten notes of gratitude. I handed out personalized letters to each team member, acknowledging their late nights and unwavering support. There were hugs, a few tears, and a renewed spirit that crackled through the room like electricity. It struck me then that the greatest turning of tables hadn't been legal or financial, it had been human. We had transformed adversity into unity. Even with external dangers neutralized, I remained vigilant. I oversaw the implementation of new multi-factor approval workflows for any transaction over $50,000, 0 cents, ensuring that 2 executives signed off on each wire transfer. I mandated quarterly external audits and annual FX training led by independent facilitators. I also championed the launch of an anonymous tip line, monitored by a rotating committee, so anyone could flag suspicious activities without fear of retribution. Each policy change was a shield against future betrayal, a testament to the fact that real power lies in prevention, not just reaction. By December, the metrics began to reflect our renewed strength. We closed a $20 million 0 cents fundraise for our next venture fund, surpassing our initial target by 20%. Investor confidence was solidified, and our limited partners commended our transparent approach in the fund's annual report. At the winter holiday party, a cozy gathering in our lower Manhattan office, I stood on a small stage beneath twinkling lights and raised a glass. The audience of 80 colleagues and partners hung on my every word as I said, "This year taught us that betrayal can either break us or make us stronger." We chose the latter. Applause rippled through the room, and I allowed myself a genuine smile. As the party wound down, I slipped away to the rooftop terrace, where my journey with Morgan had begun. The skyline was dusted with winter's first frost, and the city's heartbeat pulsed below. I raised a thermos of hot chocolate in a quiet toast to the empty night air. The tables had turned indeed. I had reclaimed control, safeguarded our fund, and redefined my own role from analyst to leader. But more than that, I had learned that true power doesn't stem from unchallenged trust, but from the capacity to act decisively when that trust is broken. Looking out at the glittering expanse, I whispered, "We've won this round." And as the city breathed beneath me, I knew that whatever storms lay ahead, I had the strength and the conviction to turn the tables again. In the aftermath of the scandal, I often found my thoughts drifting to Morgan Blake's perspective, the side of the story that seldom reached the headlines. I wondered what private storm had driven her to risk everything we'd built together. Through depositions and forensic transcript, fragments of her personal hardships emerged, amounting $50,000, 0 cents debt to a shadowy private lender, loan agreements carrying 30% monthly interest, and the constant fear of suffocating collateral calls. Morgan had never spoken of these pressures in our rooftop celebrations or data sessions, yet they had shadowed her every decision. One late-night deposition transcript described her trembling voice as she recounted how Rowan Steele had promised to cover her debts in exchange for advancing consulting fees. She believed him, she said, because he presented a pitch deck of such flawless projections that her own financial panic melted away into professional admiration. She spoke of sleepless nights, scanning bank statements for overdraft fees, and rationing her own salary to keep up with interest payments on that clandestine loan. It was a portrait of desperation hidden beneath Chicago-grade poker face and VC polish. I remembered a moment in the deposition when she clenched the armrests of the chair and whispered, "I thought I was saving the fund by leveraging his resources, not ruining it." Her eyes brimmed with regret as she described wiring funds to Rowan's offshore account, convinced they would be repaid once Redwood Health's Series B closed. In the transcript, her hand shook so much that she nearly signed blank pages and overlooked detail Marcus had noted. It was a stark reminder that even the most composed leaders can fracture under private duress. Beyond the numbers and legal briefs, this side story offered a deeper lesson. Betrayal often springs from vulnerability. Morgan's downfall was not born solely of greed but of a skeletal foundation under pressure. Her confession in that narrow conference room, hands folded, voice cracking, revealed how personal debt and professional pride combined to create a fateful misjudgment. It was a cautionary tale for every analyst and partner at BrightWave. Behind every balance sheet lies a human story with hidden fissures. In the quiet evenings that followed, as I reviewed these transcripts, I felt a pang of sympathy. Morgan had once been my mentor, and her collapse now served as a mirror to my own potential blind spots. The side story stayed with me as I refined our new risk protocols, reminding me that numbers could never fully capture the complexities of human fear and hope. Beneath the polished facade of venture capital, we are all human, capable of brilliance, and prone to error when the private stakes become too heavy. Armed with this insight, I introduced a mentorship component to our onboarding, pairing new analysts with senior staff trained to watch for personal stress signals as well as financial red flags. I even collaborated with HR to create a confidential wellness fund, so no colleague would face hidden debt alone. Through these measures, I sought to honor Morgan's story, transforming her suffering into a safeguard that might prevent future tragedy. It was my way of ensuring that empathy, alongside data, guided every decision at BrightWave. The morning of the verdict arrived like a tidal wave I couldn't outrun. I sat in the packed courtroom on December 15, 2021, heart pounding as the judge read the findings of the civil suit against Morgan Blake and Rowan Steele. The oak-paneled room, with its high ceilings and towering windows, felt colder than any winter wind I'd ever felt on that rooftop terrace. I clutched the leather portfolio Morgan had once gifted me, now filled with depositions, bank statements, and legal briefs. As the judge announced the award, $1,398,000, 0 cents in punitive damages against Morgan, and an additional $200,000, 0 cents against Rowan, I felt a hollow victory, justice on paper, but the personal cost weighed heavily. Morgan sat at the defense table, flanked by her attorney, shoulders hunched. The room fell silent when the judge addressed her directly. Ms. Blake, your breach of fiduciary duty and collusion have caused significant financial and reputational harm. I hereby order you to repay $1,498,000 within 90 days to BrightWave Ventures. And I sanction you with a 2-year prohibition from any executive role in financial services. Failure to comply will result in contempt and potential imprisonment. Her attorney rose to object, citing Morgan's cooperation and personal debts. The judge acknowledged the hardship but refused to alter the order. Ms. Blake, he repeated, the court must protect the integrity of financial markets. Morgan's composure finally crumbled. Sympathy washed over me, but I remained impassive. Justice demanded its toll. After the hearing, I walked into the courthouse foyer, the murmur of reporters' questions echoing off marble floors. Cameras flashed as Morgan emerged, eyes red, hair in a hasty bun. She didn't look at me, instead staring at the floor, shoulders trembling. Rowan Steele trailed behind, wearing a defiant scowl. I slipped past without meeting their gaze. The next day, our press release detailed the judgment, restitution paid, punitive damages assessed, and Morgan's ban. Within hours, Bloomberg and Reuters ran headlines. BrightWave forces former CRO to pay $1.50 ban 2 years. Reading the news felt surreal. The fund's integrity was restored, yet memories of Morgan's mentorship lingered. In the following weeks, I monitored compliance. Our legal team confirmed $500,000, 0 cents of Morgan's payments, deposited by January. She sold her downtown condo to raise funds for misinformation I gleaned from public records. Rowan Steele quietly settled with our insurer, his name fading under confidentiality. Each update closed a wound painful but necessary for healing. At the office, colleagues whispered as I passed. Some offered congratulations, others sympathy. I responded with nods, keeping my focus on the future. Yet I mourned privately. In the conference room where Morgan and I once strategized, I discovered her leather journal on an empty chair. I opened to final pages where she'd penciled target goals for our next fund rings, replaced by legal footnotes. One afternoon, I attended the legal team's closure gathering. Morgan stood at the back in a gray sweater and black slacks. Our eyes locked briefly. She offered a hesitant nod. I returned it. No words were spoken. None were needed. That evening, I hosted a dinner on the rooftop terrace for investors and senior staff, a quiet celebration of resilience. Under string lights, I shared plans for our next venture fund, a $25 million 0 cents seed round, targeting climate tech startups. I spoke of lessons learned, emphasizing human factors as much as financial metrics. In their acceptance and applause, I saw renewed trust, proof that the antagonist's downfall had fortified our community. Weeks later, I reviewed my calendar and noted Morgan's payment deadline. I drafted one final memo. Confirm full repayment by March 15. Closed file. Hitting send felt like laying the last brick of a rebuilt house. The dossier would move to archives, but its imprint on BrightWave's culture would endure. Late that night, I returned to the terrace alone. The city's rhythm had softened under holiday lights. I opened my notebook and underlined Marcus's "Inside integrity is a journey, not an endpoint." I closed it, zipped my coat, and raised my tea in a silent toast. The antagonist's downfall was complete, legal, public, our birth guru. But our true victory lay in collective resilience, and in our own evolution from analyst to steward of both financial and human capital. When the dust finally settled and the last memos were filed away, I stood at the threshold of a new chapter for BrightWave Ventures and for myself. It was March 30, 2022, exactly 90 days since the judge's ruling. The final payment from Morgan Blake had hit our account that morning, the full $1,498,000 0 cents, down to the last dollar. I watched the balance update, then closed my eyes and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. In the weeks leading up to this moment, I had immersed myself in rebuilding not only operational systems, but also the moral fabric of our organization. I oversaw the integration of multi-vendor approval workflows for all transactions above $50,000. And ensured that no wire transfer could proceed without two signatories, at least one of whom was independent of the deal. I championed quarterly external audits, funded by a dedicated compliance budget of $120,000, 0 cents per year, and annual ethics training led by an impartial third party. We launched an anonymous tip line, monitored by a rotating ethics committee, and even partnered with a mental health service to provide confidential counseling to any staff grappling with personal or professional stress. These measures transformed our fund into a model of transparency and accountability. But policies and processes alone could not heal the deeper wounds. I organized a one-day retreat at a lakeside conference center upstate, inviting every member of our New York office. We spent the morning in facilitated workshops on trust, vulnerability, and leadership, sharing personal stories in small circles. I opened up about my own journey, from the thrill of landing my first $85,000, 0 cents salary and champagne toasts with Morgan, through the gut punch of betrayal, to the long nights poring over forensic spreadsheets. I watched colleagues nod as they heard the full arc of our story, the triumphs, the collapse, the recovery, the retribution. In the afternoon, we broke into teams for trust-building exercises, a blindfolded obstacle course, a group problem-solving challenge, and a reflective journaling session by the lake. As the sun dipped below the trees, we gathered around a fire pit, each of us sharing an ash-marked twig, a symbol of our commitment to rising from the ashes of this experience. Returning to the city, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I drafted a formal resolution for our board of directors, entitled BrightWave Ventures, a Covenant of Integrity, which laid out our new ethical charter, detailed compliance commitments, and an annual review process. The board unanimously approved it on April 15, 2022. In my closing remarks, I said, "Today we cement not just rules but our shared value. We pledge that when trust is broken, we will respond with accountability. When systems fail, we will rebuild them stronger, and when individuals falter, we will support them in finding a better path." On May 1, I opened my inbox to a message from Samantha Cole, my angel investor. "Congratulations, Jordan. You've turned a crisis into a catalyst for excellence. I'm increasing my commitment to your next fund by $2 million, 0 cents. Her faith had once sparked my recovery, now it was fueling our future. I forwarded her note to the team, and we celebrated with cupcakes from a local bakery this time. A symbol of triumph, not treachery. Over the summer, we closed our new $25 million 0 cents seed fund, surpassing our initial target by 15%. We invested in 7 startups, each screened through our enhanced risk framework, with projects spanning climate tech, health tech, and sustainable agriculture. In every pitch review, I felt the tension between optimism and caution, a healthy balance born of hard-learned lessons. Personally, I carried forward a mantra on my desk plaque: integrity is tested, not when all is well, but when all is broken. Each morning as I passed it, I remembered the night spent on the Hudson jogging away doubt. The long hours drafting legal filings, the tearful deposition where Morgan confessed her pain, and the thrill of that final court victory. I realized that integrity wasn't a static attribute but an active practice, demanding vigilance, compassion, and sometimes the courage to confront those we once trusted most. One evening in September, I received a letter from Morgan Blake. She'd complied fully with the court order and was seeking to rebuild her life. In her letter, she expressed remorse and offered gratitude for the wellness fund we'd established. She'd benefited from it during her darkest days. She asked only for one thing, that I share a list of the books and podcasts that had helped me through the ordeal. I paused before replying, but ultimately sent her my recommendations. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, Brené Brown's Daring Greatly, and the Masters of Scale podcast by Reid Hoffman. I concluded, may these guide you as they did me. By the end of 2022, BrightWave Ventures had not only recovered financially but emerged stronger in reputation. Industry peers reached out to learn about our compliance innovations, and I spoke at 2 conferences on ethical resilience in venture capital. Each talk began with a story of betrayal and ended with a blueprint for building trust. In every audience, I saw nods of recognition, proof that we weren't alone in facing human flaws within high-stakes finance. Looking back on the journey, I understood that the greatest lesson was not in detecting a $150,000 0-cents microtransaction or drafting a $1 million lawsuit. It was in remembering our shared humanity. And when those relationships shatter, it is only through accountability, empathy, and decisive action that we can rebuild and perhaps emerge more resilient than before. As I write this, I sit on the rooftop terrace once more, the skyline glowing beneath the stars. I raise my thermos of tea to the empty air and whisper, "This is not an ending, but a beginning." The lessons of the past year guide every step I take forward toward new ventures, uncharted opportunities, and a commitment that in every venture we back, we will invest not only capital but integrity.